I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Most Haunted City on Earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
And I'm Chris Susie.
And we have another Q&A for you guys. You guys came through with the questions this week, seriously.
Keep asking them.
Yes, please ask us any of your ghosty questions that you might have.
In the Q&A
Yep, in the Q&A section. It makes my life so much easier, y'all, to be quite honest. So I don't have to dig through all the comments. Definitely ask questions on videos if you feel like you have a question. But if you want one that you want for sure to be answered in a Q&A video, definitely utilize the Q&A section. But with that being said...
Absolutely. Before we get started, I would like to thank some of the new patrons that we have got on Patreon.
Woohoo.
So I want to thank Bad Lil Goth.
We love her.
We do love Bad Lil Goth.
Yeah.
I want to thank Lauren. I want to thank Chastity Wynn and Penny Boyce. Y'all keep this going, and we really, 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 really appreciate it.
Yes, if you would like to become a patron, you get exclusive content. You get videos like literally as soon as JT is done editing them.
That's the first thing I do is I upload it to Patreon.
You get to see us be goofballs in the Patreon video thing.
This is true.
We don't get to see what it looks like after we record it, so hopefully it looks good to you guys. But yeah, so definitely check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/Savannah Underground.
Absolutely, absolutely. And since this episode is dropping Saturday, that means that last Thursday, we dropped our first mobile podcast where we went to Rupert, West Virginia. And
the unincorporated area
Sam
of
Black,
Greenbrier County.
Sam Black Church.
Yes.
Black Church, West Virginia. And we did a podcast on the Greenbrier Ghost. And that is really awesome. And then this Tuesday, you're going to see our other mobile podcast that we shot in West Virginia, and that is the Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park.
And
that's a fun one.
They're very fun. Yeah, if you want to see JT and I talk about a dead woman next to her grave, definitely check that out. Yeah,
Who wouldn't want that?
I know, right?
All right, let's go ahead and get started, everybody. First question. Corey in Denny asks, "Hi. JT, you've mentioned believing in God. How do you believe in God and ghosts? I'm also a Christian, but used to believe ghosts were just demons." That's an interesting question. I've actually never been asked a question, so thank you, Corey and Danny. Yes, I do believe in God. I am a Christian. I don't flaunt it, though, everywhere, but I definitely am. And, to be honest, I believed in God way longer than I believed in ghosts, and Madison was actually the person who God put in my life to help me understand what spirits and what ghosts are, and that they're energy, and it's almost like ghosts are energy of people left over on this earth. So maybe their soul could be in heaven while their spirit is here. I definitely believe in demons, like 100,000%, demonic possessions and all of that. And those are not ghosts. Those are things that have never been alive.
I think if you're going from a Christianity perspective, a lot of people have the misconception that ghosts are demons. Even though in the Bible, there are plenty of accounts of paranormal experiences with angels, demons, ghosts in general. So it's easy for people to just assume anything that's supernatural is evil, but that isn't always the case. So,
and I think that when dealing with faith, it really does come down to a lot of conditional things, because our interpretation of whatever spirituality there is very personal, and it comes down from a line of tradition, oral traditions, going to church, having all these things. So, it's interesting because a lot of people use religion to condemn even other religions, other faiths. Even within the Christian, faith, denominations will pit each other against each other over what is roughly a question of interpretation, a question of very small but essential interpretations of supernatural existence and higher powers and things like that. So it's a question of how exclusively do you want to hold your opinion. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with having this strong and faithful understanding of the universe and the world around you and how things are. But to be open to the idea of all these other races and religions around the world, they are interpreting, hopefully, the idea of this singular God that loves us all, that is coming to us with information. And because of regionality, we have interpreted it a very specific way. I like to believe that God is universal, but we are not. As human beings, we look at things and interpret them through the lens of our culture, through the lens of our experience, and that narrows our view. And that is not to speak out against any one religion or for another, but to say that each religion is taking information that is above and beyond our comprehension and explaining it in very human terms. So when people are like, I believe in God, so I don't believe in that, the question really is your belief in God the interpretation that you were given? And if you looked at other interpretations, could you find those universal truths? Just about every religion on earth has a philosophy of do unto others as you would have done unto you. Every single one has a variation of that very concept. And that, to me, seems like a close approximation of the Word of God if everyone heard it. If everyone in the world heard the same message, I was like, well, okay. But, sometimes it's delivered to people differently or interpreted differently. But if the message is the same, then I think that might be the voice of God.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Corey and Denny. That was an awesome question. We appreciate it. All right, next question. What's your take on the BuzzFeed guys at the Sorrel Weed House, Tear Dark Archimus?
So I actually haven't watched the Sorrel Weed House episode yet.
Ditto.
I have watched BuzzFeed Unsolved for a long time, and I take it as entertainment value. I don't take what they present as paranormal evidence or even really paranormal investigation, because a lot of it is so
disrespectful.
Well, yes. So I have other opinions on the ways that they go about their behavior in haunted locations, just because sometimes it does lean on the side of like, imagine if somebody came into your house and laid down in your floor and said, show yourself to me, you would be really annoyed too, because you'd be like, what is happening? Why are you doing that? It's the same way when you go into a haunted location where that is their home. You are going in there and just like antagonizing spirits. So I am a little weary of watching the Sorrel Weed House one, just because I am familiar slightly with their spirits and I know how sensitive they can be.
Oh, yes.
And also the spirits that are in that house are not mean, but they will lash out at you if you disrespect them. So it's like, I worry about things like that, and I don't like misinformation on Savannah Homes.
Have you seen it?
I have seen it.
Okay.
And there's, I think, at the bottom of everything is just a general philosophy of mine, which is don't be a jerk. Mm-hmm. Don't be a jerk. Being a skeptic does not give you the license to be a jerk. Those become separate things. You can be a skeptic, but if you're a jerk, you're a jerk. If you're a skeptic, that's not, oh, well, I'm using my skepticism to support being a jerk. And that kind of is what always gets me is people, and it kind of comes on both sides. Being a skeptic doesn't give you a license to be a jerk. Being a true believer doesn't give you license to be a jerk. Absolutely. So people show up in haunted places and they're very forceful or very asinine. And you get this kind of rapport, which is, and in the BuzzFeed situation, what I see is it is an entertainment. And it's entertaining. I'm not going to say it's not entertaining, but it is this kind of, well, what do you expect? You show up with a big, I'm going to mock whatever happens, scenario.
Is that how it's treated?
Usually.
Well, it's basically
interesting.
In short terms, a person who believes and a person who doesn't.
Okay.
And they lean heavily on those directions, so they pull against each other. And again, it's an entertaining repartee. They're funny. It's fun. But I would not utilize it as a guide to paranormal. They do go to great places, and they do have the information straight as far as explaining what the story is. But when they're in the place themselves, it is those two extremes of wild wonder and kind of bitter skepticism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And those two combinations, while again entertaining to watch, are not overly informative.
I think we just all need to respect our ghosts.
I think we just need to respect each other.
Yeah.
Dead or not.
Yeah, dead or not. Just be respectful.
Just be respectful.
Because that's there's interactions between the two that are disrespectful.
Sure.
And hence, again, don't be a jerk.
Go ahead and say the word jerk into the microphone so I can take jerk, copy it, and place it.
Jerk. It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Well,
they mean donkey. So,
Spotify might get at me. They might be like, yo, you said 15 cuss words in this.
No, it's a 3-letter word.
Yes.
Yes, it's true. It's true. But no, really.
Jerk.
Thank you.
Jerk.
But yes, that's the basis of my problem with that particular show in general, and a lot of paranormal shows where they just go in and they treat it like it's a fun house where you can the ghosts are on the payroll basically, and they are here at your.
I don't think a lot of those people believe in ghosts. I think
well,
they're all like, we're definitely not going to capture anything, so we have to be funny or we have to do something ridiculous.
Some people are also just ridiculous human beings, and so it's like.
Well, I don't even think that's the case. I think that it's knowing. It fills a very specific niche.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, it's very entertaining. Kudos to them for what they've created and how popular it is. Absolutely. Yeah. And I have nothing personally against them. It's just it seems to give people and I've run into many people who use their skepticism as their as an offensive weapon. And it's like there's nothing wrong. I embrace skepticism. I think that if you go on a ghost hunt, you should have at least one skeptic with you, if not more, simply to keep you grounded.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to get swept up by the sensations and by the feelings and by all these other things without a skeptic handy to kind of keep you grounded. You can work yourself into a frenzy.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of misinformation too, out there about a lot of these places. We actually just experienced that where we, a couple weeks ago, did an episode on Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park on our other podcast called From One to Wicked. And we basically took what information was on the internet. We did some heavy research and all of that. And then we actually went there literally a couple days ago to shoot the mobile podcast for the most haunted city on earth, and the guy who's running it is like, we haven't built this theme park on an Indian burial ground. That's over there, about half a mile over there. And I was like, huh? It's like, everyone says that it's that's why all this death. And he goes, no, it's not the Native American spirits killing these kids. It's human error. And I was like, oh, and so I think that a lot, like, even, I'm not saying that that the BuzzFeed guys do this or anything like that. I'm just saying that there's a lot of misinformation about ghosts and hauntings out there, and I think that it's important for people, who don't necessarily rely on humor, kind of like us, to go there and tell the correct story from the mouth of babes.
Yeah. Well, in the case of the Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park, that was perpetuated by TV. They came up with the narrative that this was built on top of a Native American burial ground to get views, because that sounds more freaky. Where in reality, they're very respectful to the Native American burial ground that is not even on where the amusement park even once stood. Even how it is now was not originally how it was constructed, but even the way it was originally constructed, no proof that it would have ever been on top of bodies.
You'll see that this Tuesday, because we're clarifying everything about Lake Shawnee in that episode. We're actually thinking about calling the episode "The Truth About Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park," because Chris, our guy, the one of the owners, he was like, if you guys are doing this, maybe I know you're going to try to, he thought that we were going to try to make everything bigger and, crazier for entertainment. And we're like, no, we're going to tell the straight story, even if it's boring. Like, we're just going to tell it.
But it is haunted.
Yeah.
Fear not. It is haunted.
It is haunted. It is haunted. Like, yes, it's true. But anyway, so that, and then one other thing about that, because I have strong opinions on this, trying to make things funny, and even though you should be much more respectful. The guy, one of the locals actually stopped by to talk to us about the Greenbrier ghost when we were at her grave, and he said that there were people shooting a video doing a seance at this woman's grave. And I'm like, that's insane. Like, why would you do a seance at a grave? Do you not know what a portal is? Do you not know what any of that is? They're obviously not paranormal experts.
Well, no, but it's fun for people to go to someone's grave and try to invoke something, and it's...
She's long gone.
And the whole purpose of a grave is to designate an area for respects.
Yeah.
And for, the whole concept of, showing any disrespect at a gravesite, any disturbance of a gravesite, even the idea of the Native American burial grounds, the concept that is just handed down throughout history is, do not disturb the dead where they rest. We build plots of land specifically to keep them, give them a place to be, because of a belief structure that has been,
absolutely,
since the beginning of mankind, has been this construct of the dead need a place to rest, so that they don't bother us, so that they don't, give us pause or trouble, and if you wanted to go way back into the idea of, we probably bury our loved ones because we don't want them to be, eaten by animals. We don't want, that's fair if you want to go that far back. But our rituals that we have built around death clearly dictate that this is their place of rest. Don't bother them at their place of rest.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think not to harp on this subject, but it's a great question. It's a great question with the BuzzFeed's guys at the Sorrel Weed House, even if they didn't do a bunch of disrespectful stuff. I haven't seen the episode, but what
and I definitely probably came down really hard on that. I wouldn't say that they were particularly disrespectful in that sense. It's just the thematic approach.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're going to be in the Swirl Weed House on the 13th, filming a series episode, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's going to be really cool. But basically, just kind of like piggybacking off this question, do you want to tell the listeners / viewers how to be respectful? Like when visiting a gravesite or when visiting what are some rules you should stick to?
Well, depends on your belief system, because Jewish cultures and religion have totally different belief systems from Christian beliefs and then from pagan beliefs. So take this with a grain of salt, depending on your personal belief system. Typically, what I do when I go to a cemetery is I leave an offering at the grave keeper or the gatekeeper's grave, which is usually the closest grave to the entrance or exit of the cemetery. Leave a little offering for them to say, like, hey, I'm not going to do anything disrespectful here. I'm acknowledging you. And then I bring an offering to whoever's grave that I am visiting. So like for Zona, I brought coins to put on top of her headstone. But that's why we leave flowers at headstones. People leave rings, they leave trinkets, they leave seashells. It really depends on what you personally feel connected to. I know in the Jewish faith, they leave rocks on top of headstones. So that's just the way to be like respectful. Don't leave trash in a cemetery. If you see trash, pick it up, because that is your
don't put your Doritos back.
Yeah, it's your responsibility to keep it, in order. Don't go traipsing on top of headstones or like fallen headstones or on top of where people are buried if you can help it. Sometimes it can be a little tricky depending on how old it is. But, just maneuver like you would in like a very respectful manner. If you were going into a really nice house, you're not going to go touching things and moving things or taking things. Please don't take things from cemeteries. Don't take offerings.
Yeah.
So,
Chris, anything?
Yeah, generally be respectful. That should be a simple guideline of it all. If you're hoping to have experiences, stay open. Don't antagonize. Usually antagonistic action gets antagonistic response. What you put out, you get back. Being open gives you a certain amount of authority. It suggests that you will be receptive to whatever happens. Whereas oftentimes, I've noted this before, that a lot of times when you see an investigator go into a place and be very antagonistic and get responses from the antagonizing, oftentimes I believe that those people are dealing with the spirits that they themselves have cultivated through a lifetime of walking around. People are more likely to be haunted than places. We have ghosts that will just attach to us and follow us around. And people who get these responses and their names called and scratches and things like that, oftentimes if they have it multiple places, it would seem like they're dealing with the same spirit rather than having the same interaction with different spirits in all these places. And they're all like, oh, look, I was scratched. Oh, look, they called my name. Things like that. When you start seeing patterns like that, you're probably not dealing with the ghost of the property or the space, but with a ghost that you're carrying around with you. So I strongly suggest just being respectful, and by respectful, I just mean think of it as meeting new people.
Yeah.
If you just show up and see a new person and you're like, what? Come on. It doesn't breed any goodwill.
No, it doesn't.
All right. So that was a long answer from all of us to that one question.
Yes.
But I love it.
We have a lot of opinions.
All right. Do you have any River Street Inn stories or experiences? I stayed there in July and definitely had an interesting feeling. Love the podcast. CSU Blett asked that. Thank you, CSU Blett.
Is that Hank at the River Street Inn?
That's Old Harbor Inn.
Oh, that's Old Harbor Inn.
River Street Inn, I don't know of like a specific ghost that's like super prominent where they know a name or they've given it a name or anything. It's a lot of residual energy is what I remember.
Right there, dead center, right?
Yeah.
Kind of right in the middle of, it was a high commerce area. It was definitely where, slaves were brought through. It was definitely where people had highs and lows. River Street is incredibly haunted because it was the frontier of Savannah. So, yeah, I would definitely say that all those buildings along River Street, along Factors Walk, you're going to find all kinds of residual energies and residual ghosts, but also many individual ghosts, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not that I'm aware of there's a specific ghost, but I know people have like reported having, like hearing people walking down the halls, people being in their rooms. Of course, there's always kid ghosts because there's always kid ghosts in Savannah.
This might be the only time that I know of a ghost story that y'all don't.
Oh.
But I remember, I'm trying to think of who told me this. It wasn't like a ghost tour because I'm married to a ghost tour, so why would I take one? But it was hearing the haunt was in the River Street Inn. There was someone screaming like they were being burned alive. Oof. That's what I remember. The story in the river. Has it ever caught on fire?
Yes.
Oh yes. Yeah. All over River Street has been on fire.
So that could be something that maybe they experienced. I'm not sure.
Well, and
let us know. CSU
hotels being transient places to begin with attract a lot. I talk a lot about homeless ghosts that do not have a place to haunt because of significant trauma or anything like that. They're just ghosts that mill about, ghosts that don't necessarily have a purpose, quote unquote purpose. And when you have a place of high transience, people coming and going, lots of energies moving, lots of excitements in hotels, lots of intrigues, lots of things going on. And I have to imagine that ghosts are kind of voyeuristic. So, the idea of a place where people come and go and have all forms, from weddings to funerals, people have come and stayed in a hotel with all emotions present and all emotions out. That is excellent ghost bait.
Is that the one next to Huey's?
Yes.
Okay. That's that. So years ago, now it's all coming back to me. Years ago, before I even met you, babe, I was at Huey's with my family, and we were next to a table, and my parents started to get into conversation with them, and they said that they were staying at the River Street Inn, and that they were told that sometimes you can hear people screaming as if they're being burned, and that they actually heard it. They thought that they heard it in the middle of the night. Yeah. That's what it was.
I believe it. I mean, yeah, River Street, like Chris has said, it's all burned at some point, if not multiple times it's burned.
Okay.
So, if somebody did get caught inside of that fire, it's very possible, and that's going to leave an impression on the hotel.
Especially when you think that it was like warehouses and loading areas, so it's possible that multiple people could have been in a building that was on fire.
Absolutely.
That you're now talking about the fact that at any given time there are people loading and unloading those ships and putting things into a storage. I know that just 2 blocks down is where the shrimp factory was, and I remember a very similar story to there being stores of cotton there that caught on fire at one time, or and lots of different tales of just horrible working conditions on top of that.
Yeah.
We just went through a very brutal summer, and can you imagine no air conditioning, doing hard manual labor? There's a lot of harsh conditions in Savannah summers. Yeah.
All righty. Great question. Great questions. Seriously. That's awesome. All right. I have had 5 new light bulbs burn out in the past 3 months, and 3 of those times I've seen a shadow figure or felt a chill. What do I do? 2 straps, Roy.
Oh, I think
2 straps, Troy.
Yeah.
Ask that.
All right, Two Straps Troy. Well, it sounds to me like you have some kind of trickster spirit or like some kind of low energy thing that is trying to get your attention to basically keep itself going. So a lot of times, and we've talked about this, where spirits will use electricity to kind of charge themselves up. So it's really common when spirits are present to have light bulbs go out or things like that, or have cell phones not work, or your cell phone battery drains out of nowhere. So more than likely, you kind of just need to set a boundary with your ghost of saying like, hey, I know it sounds weird, but like a lot of times just talking to the ghost really does do a lot, where you're like, listen, I don't appreciate you burning out my light bulbs, or I don't appreciate seeing you or being around you. You can be here, but you need to leave me alone, or you need to leave, you know, things like that. A lot of times just being forceful and saying like, this is my house. If you're going to be here, you have to be courteous. Essentially, it helps. It really does.
Yeah.
So.
When you think that one of the primary reasons why a ghost will bother a living person is for that attention. And if you can give it to them freely, then they don't have to work for it. So by addressing them, by stating that you acknowledge them, they do not feel the need to present anything to you because you are giving them that attention. Sometimes you might have to do it regularly, you know, at intervals, just kind of acknowledge their presence so that they don't bother you. I also suggest maybe getting an electrician out to look at your
Light
fixture.
bulbs, yeah.
You know, your fixture might be running at, you know, a strange voltage. There might be something going on there.
Or maybe
just to be
spirits.
safe. Because it's absolutely true that there are so many documented instances where electricity is a common food for spirits. You know, I've oftentimes said that one of the reasons why I think theaters are so haunted is because of those high intense lights, you know, banks and banks of them putting out all that electricity. That is, you know, a great source of energy for a ghost. And you can cultivate ghosts that way too, is you know, I remember talking to a man who believed that if you lived closer to those power converter boxes that you see on power lines, you know,
like
those
transformer
boxes, if you live, the closer you live to them, the more likely your house is to be haunted.
What?
You know, it
No
was just
way.
you know, one of those wild theories that
Yeah.
come up is I've noted
Wow.
that ghosts have more energy
Yeah.
the closer they are to transformer boxes.
Yeah.
Well-
So there's a lot of interesting ways to approach it. Also, if you're seeing a shadow figure, that's always deeply disconcerting. But not all shadow figures are, you know, harmful entities. Some of them just don't have definition. You know, some spirits, you know, lose their definition over time simply because they don't know exactly what they were or who they are. And over time, maintaining the presence of who they are is difficult. You know, I oftentimes think that as spirits go on in time, they sort of lose that notion of who they were. You know, when they're freshly dead, they can show up and they have a lot of the attributes of the person. But over time, when no one knows who they are, their definition starts, like even their definition of who they are. You know, for a long time, it's like, oh, that's Uncle Rick. I saw Uncle Rick. He was in the corner. But then a new family moves in. They don't know Uncle Rick. And they say, oh, there's a man. There's a man there. And that diminishes Uncle Rick's features to just being a man. And then soon it's like, there's someone there. Someone's in the room. There's someone here. And it starts to diminish more and more. And then it becomes something.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so over time, I think that spirits can lose that definition without reinforcement.
And maybe it's going to electricity because it doesn't have that definition. It doesn't have. It's not being
Absolutely.
charged up by people talking about, like Alice Riley over here doesn't need anything. Alice Riley's like, you know, going around, I'm gonna steal your baby, just like everywhere.
And I believe that, you know, there are these shadow figures that once you start talking about a spirit, they start to try to form
Yeah.
They listen
Identities.
to, they form these identities. So, there might be several Alice Rileys by now,
Yeah.
who are just wandering aimlessly about because somebody defined them. Somebody looked at them and you hear these ghost stories and it's like, oh, that's who I am. That's, I am this amalgamous spirit looking for definition. And these people are just defining like crazy. And it's like, I will define myself. I will use their definition to nourish myself.
We made that TikTok. We posted that TikTok last night about the man with the hat.
Oh yeah.
And
man with the hat is an excellent
everyone was like commenting. Some dude like stitched it, and they were all like, I've seen the man with the hat, and it's like, wow,
it's a very common experience for people. That's why I say it's a low energy being. Shadow people are usually just low energy being. I see them pretty frequently. They're probably, in my opinion, one of the more common spirits to see because it's easy for our perception to pick up on shadowy figures because there's not a lot going on to them. But feel out the vibe with your shadow person.
Absolutely.
You can usually tell if this is like something malicious pretty quickly, but from what it sounds like, you're just more frustrated with the spirit, exactly. So which is fair.
Just ask them to stop.
Yeah,
they do that. They listen, right? Don't they?
Usually,
like you ask Jim
usually it depends on the ghost.
Or Sage, right?
Well,
I don't know. I'm getting totally out of my.
It's all about intention.
Intent,
yeah. So if you don't believe it's any kind of like sage or cedar or whatever you're using to cleanse works, it's not going to do nothing.
What's
for
that
you.
sage I like? Is it the blood sage?
You like dragon's blood.
Dragon's blood,
but that's for a whole different thing. You don't
That's
cleanse
fun.
with dragon's blood. But
I just like it because it's like red. It's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Alrighty. Let's go on to the next one. Great questions. I'm going to say great questions after every single question,
Because
just
they
a
are
heads up.
very good.
Just because I'm so excited about how many people are asking great questions. We really appreciate you. Okay. So, Dawn C _ Mama in the Holler.
Is West Virginia?
Yeah, it must be. It must be. The Hollers of West Virginia. We were in the Hollers. All righty. All right. So, Dawn C _ Mama in the Holler asks, first off, completely obsessed with y'all. Thank you. We're obsessed with you too. What experience completely changed your life to know that the paranormal is what you wanted to pursue?
It's funny. I don't know if I have a ghost experience that made me really want to
I disagree.
Be interested in paranormal. Well, I mean, obviously I was kind of just like thrown into the fire of ghosts, but regardless, no, like honestly, where I started picking up on like wanting to be like a ghost tour guide, which is really where my ghost career started, I guess, was probably when I was like 10 years old and my dad took me to St. Augustine, and I'm a history nerd. So I pick up on history really quickly, and especially when it's paranormal history. And he took us there and he was like, he's like, you would be such a good tour guide when you get older because you just like absorb all this information and you just like spew it out at people. So it's, I think that was like one of the first times where I was like, yeah, I should be a ghost tour guide one day. And then I did. So I moved to Savannah and I became one. And
I think
I
think we're all just naturally obsessed with storytelling. All three of us tell stories. She's very like performative in her storytelling. You're very theory based and performative, and then I'm usually a pretty visual storyteller. So we all kind of have our own way of telling stories, and I think that's what I think that plus the interest in dark stuff.
Very much so.
Yeah, I think that's what breeds it. But I know, Madison, the first ghost story you ever told me, when I asked, like, why do you believe in ghosts, you told me about the man that would stand in your doorway.
Well, yeah, because it's freaky.
Yeah, no, but it happened at such an early age for you that was pretty like, yo. And I was like, why don't you call the police? There's a man in your doorway and it's not your father. Call the police. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I knew that it wasn't there to hurt me, and I knew that it wasn't a home invader. It was a spirit.
You can pick up on if it's like that's not a person.
And you're only a couple years old at that point. So I think that I think that for sure for me it was the little boy down the hall. The TikTok. It's that. We did an episode on it. Craziest moment of my life, especially when it comes to paranormal. Chris?
So When I was 6 years old, my family moved to Germany, and we lived in Hamburg, Germany. And I made friends really quickly with this kid. I'll call him Dave because I don't want to use his real name. And we went exploring, and this was the 70s. We're young, but for some reason, very unsupervised. And we lived on a military base, but we were right against, like, and we called it the economy, the German city. And I would follow Dave anywhere, and we would just go, out exploring and having a good time. And we came across this dilapidated old house, and every place has one of these dilapidated old houses. You just look at it and you're like, oh, that's a haunted house. You just know, you're just standing in front of it and you're like, yeah, that's obviously haunted.
Yeah.
And it had big German signs on it, and we didn't read German, and we're just like, obviously those signs say the most haunted house in the entire world. So yeah, we're looking at it and we're like, stay away, But Dave, being a more adventurous human being, decides that he wants to go inside. And so he starts like rattling on the doors, but they're all nailed shut, and like trying to pry open the windows. And I'm like, well, darn, we can't get in. Let's go.
Why is this the beginning of a Stephen King novel? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I literally.
And so he's like circling the house, and he's like, oh, hey, I found a way in. And I'm like, oh, great. So I follow him over, and he it's on the ground, and it looks like kind of like a shoebox-sized window, and he has slithered his way into. And now he's inside the house, like calling to me. He's like, hey, Chris, come on. And I didn't want to be that kid. I looked up to Dave. He was 8 years old, and I was 6, so he was like, a god. So I followed him. I went into the house, but going into the window, I dropped down into the basement. Now I'm in the basement, and I cannot reach the window. The window is too high for me to try to get back out the window. And Dave is not in the basement. Bro. And I'm just looking around, and I hear him boom, 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 boom above my head. And so I'm in the basement of the most haunted house in the world. And I'm like, I gotta get out of here. So I run up the stairs, and I get to that first floor, and I'm going around like, Dave. Can't find him. He's not on the first floor. Boom, 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 boom. I hear it upstairs. He's on the second floor. I'm like, oh, great. Now, the first floor was mercilessly dark. The windows were all boarded up, and I was feeling my way out, and the only light that was coming was from the second floor. It was like coming down the staircase, so I was like, oh, I'll just go up where the light is and Dave is, and everything will be okay. Everything in my body hurt from fear. Fear was actually causing me physical pain. And I remember going up those stairs, and every step I was thinking, oh, I'm going to die. Every step, because the stairs were creaking so loudly that I literally thought they were just shouting, oh, he's right here. Ghosts, come meet him. Every step I was taking, I was like, get this kid. Get him now. So I'm up on the second floor, and there are only like 2 bedrooms, and Dave's not in either.
Bro.
And I'm just like alone now on the second floor. And the only source of light is coming through a window that wasn't boarded on the second floor. And I entertained the idea of jumping out the window. But I just kind of stood by the window because it was light. And I stayed there until the sunset. Like the street lamps came on, and the light from the street lamp was lighting up. And in this house, I started hearing the sound of chains. Like heavy, heavy chains and heavy footfalls. And it sounded like they were on the ceiling. Like there was a ghost on the ceiling walking towards me with heavy chains. And I'm just like, and just when it seemed like the chains were almost over my head, I hear this piercing scream, this high-pitched piercing scream, and it's Dave. He comes tearing out of what seems like the wall. He just pops right out in front of me and runs right down towards the stairs. Now, I say this all the time. When you're on a ghost hunt or you're out in some very high-tension area, when one person screams, everybody screams. So I'm screaming, and I'm running right behind Dave. I'm running. He's running straight down the stairs. He runs straight down the stairs and hits the front door and knocks it off of its hinges. And he just keeps running. And so I run out the door. I get to the front lawn, and I feel safe. I'm outside. I'm not in the most haunted house anymore. I feel safe. Not Dave. Dave is still running. He runs all the way home. Now, by this time, the MPs are out looking for us. There's like a family network of people like going down up and down the streets looking for us.
Oh, wow.
So I get home. I get into the appropriate amount of trouble for all the panic I caused. I go back to, the next day is Monday and we go to school. Dave isn't in school. In fact, Dave never comes back to school. I only see Dave once, and it would be 3 years after this event. Meanwhile,
and he's in an insane asylum or something?
No, he was just at home.
Oh, okay.
I would go to his house all the time and ask if I could see him, and his mother would always say, no. He's not feeling well. He's not well. He's not feeling well. So, but every night I had horrible nightmares. And they're all kind of the same gist, which was I'd be having a normal dream, and then there would be a chest of drawers, like a chest of drawers. And the moment I see the drawers, I feel that pain, that fear pain.
Yeah.
And I'm drawn to the drawers. I can't not go to the drawers. I always go to the drawers. I always open the drawers, and they're full of viscera, blood and guts and gore, which as a small child, I had no concept of what the inside of a human being was like. So I'm looking at this just knowing it was revolting, but not knowing what I was looking at. Because you think that the inside of you is just red. It is not. There's all kinds of weird colors in your body. And this drawer was just full of them. And the lower the drawers, the more recognizable as humans there are. Arms and then 2 heads. Just terrible. And I had this dream every night, and I became an insomniac. And still am an insomniac. I can't really sleep well. And I've never slept well from that moment forward. Not really well. I was exhausted as a child. And when I finally heard that Dave's family was moving away, I went to see him and talk to him. And he tells me, and it's 3 years later, the difference between an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he was unrecognizable to me. He was just a hollow shell of the kid I knew. He was so vibrant and so full of life when we used to hang out. And here he was in his house, very quiet, very withdrawn. And he tells me that when he went into the house, he was drawn to go upstairs. He just felt that he had to go upstairs. And as he kept going, he found a small stairwell behind a flap in the wall that led him up into the attic. And when he was in the attic, he saw a man with an axe. And the man with the axe was like chained, covered in chains. And I was just like, I heard chains. And so we had this moment, and then he went. A year later, my family was going to move. I was still having these nightmares. I knew that I had to do something before we left. So I went back to the house. I went back to the house in the daylight. I just needed to see it, to see if it was real, because by this point, it had just become this kind of dream that I had, this weird moment that altered everything I understood. And from the moment I went into that house onward, if anybody said something was haunted or if there was a ghost or something, I was there. I went to it because the pain of fear was greater if I didn't know. Not knowing was worse than, because if somebody said that place is haunted, I'd suddenly get really anxious.
Sure.
And the only thing that would alleviate the anxiety was to go and walk through it. And so I, 6, 7, 8 years old, would oftentimes like leave the field trip. Yeah. I was that kid who was like, we need a leash on this kid. So right before we left, I went to that house, and while I was there, there was an old man tending to the lawn. Mm-hmm. But the house looks like if I really pushed hard, it would just fall over.
Yeah.
And the guy sees me standing there looking at the house, and he comes over to me, and he's like, this house is haunted. And I'm like, I know. And he tells me the story about a family that went into hiding in the attic of this house. And these bad men were going to come and take the family away. And they stayed in the attic. But one day, someone had told the bad men where the family was hiding. And so the bad men stormed into the house, went right up into the attic. And what they found when they got into the attic made them pause. Because all they found was the father of the family. It was a father, a wife, and 2 boys. But only the father was in the attic. And he had this axe. In his panic and in his insanity and in his heartache and break, he murdered his family and chopped them up and hid them under the floorboards in a chest of drawers. Ooh. And this guy's just telling me the story, and in my head, there's like a cool, sensation in my brain. And he says, the bad men were so afraid of the father that instead of taking him away, they just chained him to a post in the attic and left him. And he died of dehydration.
Oh, my Lord.
So this is the story this guy tells me. I have no idea if that's a true story, but what happened was I never had that nightmare again. When I heard the story, I never needed to wonder. My brain stopped trying to make sense of these images or these things. And that became my goal. If I could find the story, regardless of anything else, if the story can soothe the fear, I could combat it. And so that became my ghost trap. My ghost trap is a ghost story. If I find the story, I can put the ghost in it and close it, and I have it. Otherwise, it plagues me. Otherwise, I become, I get obsessed. I can become obsessive if I don't have a story. And sometimes that story has to be my own. It has to be, I don't know what the story is, but if I go in and I experience something and I turn that experience into the story that I tell, then I have, at the very least, something that soothes my anxiety and my fear about the supernatural.
Absolutely. 2 things. That one's going on TikTok. Yeah. And second, I think that we should get Chris on an episode of Haunted on Netflix.
Right?
because that literally was like a haunted episode. Like that whole story. That was a great story, Chris.
Seriously. It is a great story.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense though. Like just hearing that of why you are the way you are. No, and not in a bad way.
No.
But like it makes sense why you like to collect these ghost stories. It's
right, because again, evidence has never done it for me. Pictures don't do it for me. I mean, I enjoy them, don't get me wrong. It's just that's never been my pursuit. My pursuit has never been, well, I got to prove it, or I gotta have the evidence, or I have to have these things. It's always been, can I get an experience that translates into something that I tell somebody else, or that I understand from beginning to end. So in my repertoire are a lot of ghost stories that are, that have a beginning and end, simply for my own sanity,
sure.
for my own
goodness gracious.
Sake. And I think that is an interesting perspective too, of like everybody perceives how they react to spirits very differently. So there's people like Chris where it's like ghosts are actually really terrifying, and that story really soothes things to kind of like lock it away into that compartment, and we can reevaluate in a story telling perspective. Right. And then there's some people like me where I'm just like, cool, that's a ghost, and and I think that's just from my desensitized perspective of like, I've had so many ghosts poke and prod at me all the time, where I'm just like, yeah, okay, it's here, we're chilling, we're vibing. So, okay. And then there's JT, who's just like, oh my God, it's a ghost. It's a ghosty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So last question. comes from K.E. Windrow. And they ask, are there any stories about Gracie Watson in Bonaventure? Her story fascinates me for some reason.
Yes, that's actually my very first ghost story in Savannah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like even before I lived in Savannah. So it predates my Savannah days. And what's interesting is it goes with the storytelling concept was what I had heard, and this was, gosh, the 80s. I was told that there was this little girl statue. We didn't even have the name. It was just like there's a little girl statue in Bonaventure, and it's very lifelike, and it's very. But if you go, especially in the very coldest months, you go into the grave and you go up to her and you touch the statue. It'll be warm to the touch, like human skin.
Oh.
And that was like the ooh, let's ooh. So we take the 45-minute drive to Savannah, and we come in, and we go to Bonaventure. And Bonaventure at night is everything you want a cemetery to. It's these huge canopy of trees and moss, and it's going down a virtual labyrinth of things. And there was no internet, there was no and so we are literally just going blind through the cemetery, and we find this little girl statue, and it is a beautiful monument. But in the glow of the late night, and I want to say it was January, so it's freezing cold, and we see the statue, and I'm with a little group of friends, and they're like, yeah, go touch it, because I was the ghosty guy, and everybody's like, oh yeah, Chris will do it, and the common misconception has always been that I'm very brave. This is not true, but I'm compelled. So I come, and I remember holding my hand out and just like hovering over her face and realizing something, that if I touch her and she's cold, the story ends. I stood there for a long time, really weighing this out. It's like I could touch her, and if it's warm, then it opens up all these doors, but if it's cold, it'll be over. This story will be over for me. And it's kind of a beautiful, sweet story. It's not scary. It's not, it's such a small little thing. And I remember standing there, and I was like, this will be my story. My story will be, I'm not going to touch her.
Yeah.
So that I can preserve the story.
The story.
So that it will always be, if you go, especially in the coldest nights, and touch that statue, it'll be warm. And since I don't have verification of it, I can still say it.
Sure.
Because it was too much of a gamble for me. I don't want to lose the story by touching it and have it be cold, and then what do I do? So it becomes it's Schrodinger's ghost.
Sure. Well, you should write a book.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly enough, I am.
Oh, cool.
And one of the reasons why I don't really do a lot of podcasting or storytelling in media form is because I do have a book that is plodding along to completion.
Okay.
But keep your eyes out. There's a book.
If you complete a book, we'll be advertising it right here. We'll be like, bam.
There it is.
Yeah.
But with Gracie Watson, though, I feel like her story has been just so sensationalized that it's hard to track the actual paranormal experiences with her, because I've heard that instance that people feel the statue and it's warm.
They had to put a gate.
Exactly.
They had to build a gate around it.
But then I've heard people say, like, her eyes bleed. I'm like, her eyes don't bleed. Like, what?
Her eyes bleed.
Yeah, they're like, she's demonic. And I'm like, her eyes have never bled. What are you talking about? But honestly, the places that I think Gracie Watson has actually been seen is it's a Regions Bank.
Yeah, it's Regions Bank now.
On Johnson Square. That was where her house was. And so I've met people who've worked in that building who have said that they've experienced Gracie Watson kind of running around the hallways.
She has an account.
She does. She has an account at Regions now because she's.
Well, it used to be the Piccadilly Cafeteria, a restaurant, and we used to go there all the time, and people had all kinds of stories. Like the workers and everybody would talk about seeing a girl run past them in the line, and then there's nothing there. So, and then of course Johnson Square, famously, they say that she used to wave to people because it was a hotel that her family owned, and she used to welcome people. And so the belief is that for at least a century, there's a lot of documented stories of the little girl who waves to people as they come by, which could have just been a little girl.
Absolutely.
It's a little girl thing to do, to wave to people.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, they ascribe it to Gracie, so I'm good with that.
Yeah. So I think it's just kind of like she's just turned into this legend for Savannah, which, I mean, is totally cool if that is the way it is, you know. But Regents Bank, that's about all I got for you for like things that I know people have experienced with who they believe is Gracie Watson. So
Indeed.
But with that being said, ending on a very nice note, love always talking about little Gracie, but yeah, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for this episode. Thank you guys for asking such awesome questions. Like I said earlier, if you do have a question that you want answered on the podcast, make sure to use the Q&A button on our TikTok, which is the Savannah Underground. And if you're not already following us, make sure to follow us over there. Also check us out on Instagram at Savannah Underground. We have those special episodes coming out, or actually they should already be out, from West Virginia when you guys are watching this. So make sure you go and watch those if you want to be a patron and see all the fun content super early and get the exclusive content. Check us out and consider becoming a patron. So, Chris, do you have a ghost tip?
Yes. One of the things that people oftentimes do when they are ghost hunting is come up with a lot of, they go straight for the debunking. And debunking, a valuable tool, absolutely, but some people are ignoring aspects of the haunting. Conceptually, if you are in a place and they're like, oh, well, you know, when the wind blows, this door rattles or it closes or it does these things, what you have to remember is if a spirit is trying to communicate with you, it does not have a lot of force. So the easiest thing to move, if the wind can move it, then conceptually, so could the ghost. So don't immediately jump to the fact that you've discovered, oh, this door is loose and the wind blows it and that's what's causing it. You have to couple that with the sensation that the people are having or complaining about. They feel a sensation, and then there's this kind of rattling at the door, or this, closing of the door or opening of the door or whatever it is. If the wind can move it, so can a spirit.
Well, there you go. So with that being said, moral of the story is if the wind can move it, so can a ghost. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap things up. So my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.